Welcome to Ripple Edge, where we cut through the noise and give you the real picture on XRP. Let's get into it. The White House just confirmed a crypto reserve announcement is coming. BlackRock just told the world on live television that crypto belongs in every serious portfolio. Morgan Stanley is going all in, and Charles Schwab, one of the most conservative financial institutions on the planet managing $12 trillion in assets, just published an educational video telling their clients how to size a Bitcoin and crypto position. All of this happened in the same window. That is not a coincidence. That is a convergence. And if you are holding XRP right now, you need to understand exactly what each of these moves means and why they matter together, not separately. If this kind of edge is what you came here for, hit subscribe right now and stay ahead of the curve. Let's start with BlackRock because this is the one that sets the table for everything else. Jay Jacobs, head of thematic and active ETFs at BlackRock, went on Fox Business and said something that would have sounded insane 3 years ago. He called Bitcoin a non-sovereign global decentralized asset. He compared it directly to gold as a portfolio diversifier. He said it behaves by its own rules, driven by geopolitical risk and inflation pressure. And then he went further. He said once regulatory clarity locks in, the institutional money is not going to be spread thin across thousands of tokens. It is going to concentrate on the top 50 to 100 assets that have real adoption and real utility. He named them. XRP was on that list. So was Ethereum, Solana, and Chainlink. He said, and this is the part that matters most, that assets with ETFs will capture institutional money first before capital flows anywhere else in the market. Here is the edge on that statement. BlackRock currently manages over $10 trillion in assets. Their Bitcoin ETF, IBIT, crossed $50 billion in assets under management faster than any ETF in history. When the head of their ETF division goes on national television and says institutional money will prioritize assets with ETF wrappers, that is not casual commentary. That is a forward-looking signal about where their own product pipeline is pointing. An XRP ETF is already in the application pipeline at the SEC. BlackRock naming XRP specifically in the context of where institutional capital flows first is not an accident. Now, here is where it gets sharp, because the regulatory story is the engine behind all of this, and it just got louder. Paul Atkins, the new SEC chair, went on CNBC and laid out what he is calling the ACT strategy: advance, clarify, and transform. He said the old model of regulation through enforcement is over. The SEC is now working directly with the CFTC to define the line between tokenized securities and digital commodities. He specifically said that the goal is to bring innovation back onshore, back to the United States, away from the offshore environments that companies fled to during the hostile regulatory years. That is a direct reference to the exact environment that made the Ripple lawsuit possible in the first place. The 21 shares clip hammered this home from a different angle. Their representative pointed out that stablecoin total market cap is sitting at roughly $100 billion today, and that the industry is projecting a move into the trillions as regulatory clarity removes the friction that has been holding institutional pipelines back. The critical thing she said was this: most people will never know they are using blockchain. They will tap their card, they will see a stock settle instantly, and they will just think the system got faster. The underlying rails become invisible. That is the entire value proposition of XRP and the Ripple payment network in one sentence: speed, finality, and invisibility at scale. Morgan Stanley entering this space aggressively matters for a different reason. Their head of digital strategy, Amy Oldenburg, was candid about where the friction still lives. Right now, their broker-dealer entity cannot touch stablecoins for settlement. That is the specific gap that is keeping tokenized equity from fully delivering on its promise. She said they are mapping every single workflow, every pain point in how money moves through their system to prepare for the moment that regulatory structure catches up with the technology. That moment is not theoretical anymore. It is being actively engineered in real time by the SEC and the CFTC simultaneously. Now here is what nobody is saying loudly enough about the stablecoin piece. The co-founder of BitKit laid out the competitive dynamic in the stablecoin market, and it is brutal. Every platform that cannot pass yield through to its users has an incentive to issue its own stablecoin just to capture the interest revenue. In a fein That creates an explosion of competing stablecoins, which creates fragmentation, which creates settlement complexity, which creates exactly the kind of problem that a neutral, fast, low-cost bridging asset is built to solve. As Ripple's RLUSD is already positioned inside that race. But more importantly, XRP as the bridge asset underneath stablecoin settlement is the structural answer to a market that is about to become extremely crowded and extremely messy. Now the chart edge, pull up the total crypto market cap chart and set it to a 5-year view. What you are looking at is a market that bottomed in late 2022 around $800 billion in total market cap. Today, that number is sitting well above $2 trillion. The previous all-time high was around $3 trillion in late 2022, what existenquer SUND NGO Oberarch Q1. Here is the key point. In the 2021 run, institutional infrastructure barely existed. There was no spot Bitcoin ETF. There was no regulatory clarity framework. There was no public alignment between the SEC, the CFTC, and a White House crypto czar confirming reserve announcements on camera. We are heading back toward and potentially through that $3 trillion level with an institutional foundation that simply did not exist the last time we were there. The assets that have ETF wrappers, regulatory clarity, and named institutional adoption are the ones that capture the majority of that capital. That is not speculation. That is where the money has already said it is going. And then there is the White House piece, and this is where you need to stay clear-eyed. The head of crypto policy at the White House said on camera that an announcement on the crypto reserve is coming in the next few weeks to the next couple of months. That range is wide. Too wide for something that should already have an implementation plan after over a year of executive order activity. The original Trump announcement included XRP, Solana, and ADA as part of a broader digital asset reserve framework, not just Bitcoin. But what came out of that was an executive order focused primarily on Bitcoin, with other assets left in a vague holding pattern. The legislative track, which is a separate bill largely mirroring the Bitcoin Act, is still moving through Congress. So right now you have two parallel tracks, one executive and one legislative, and neither one has a firm date. The honest read is this. The structural tailwinds behind XRP are stronger today than they have ever been at any previous point in the asset's history. Blackrock is naming it. The SEC chair is dismantling the enforcement-first framework that created the lawsuit. Morgan Stanley is building the infrastructure. Stablecoin legislation is moving. Tokenization is being taken seriously by central banks globally. AI agents, as the Palantir co-founder noted, are going to need crypto rails to coordinate value transfer, and the assets most likely to serve that function are the ones with speed, low cost, and institutional grade settlement, which again describes XRP's core design. Charles Schwab releasing a crypto risk management video to their $12 trillion client base is not a small thing. A few years ago, a 2% crypto allocation was considered aggressive by traditional financial standards. Schwab just published a framework that normalizes 7 to 20% allocations depending on risk profile. That capital, even at 2% of $12 trillion, is $240 billion. At 5%, it is $600 billion. That money does not go into every token. It goes into the assets with ETF wrappers, regulatory clarity, and named institutional support. You already know where that points. Here is what you now know that most people in your circle do not. BlackRock named XRP directly as an institutional tier asset. The SEC is actively engineering the regulatory framework that resolves XRP's legal status. The stablecoin race structurally benefits a neutral bridge asset. And a White House reserve announcement is coming. Timing uncertain, but the direction is set. You are not watching a market getting ready to move. You are watching the institutional architecture get bolted into place in real time. That is the edge. Stay sharp, subscribe, so you catch the next one before everyone else does.